Hey fam, it's your girl Steffi. It's Friday, December 6th, and it was time to make another video, but in the interim, I got a really interesting question from one of our sisters who views this channel, and she states that she's new to duality, and she wanted to understand better what I meant by our default setting is darkness. I spoke about that in a video kind of pretty close to right after the election had happened, and I want to dig down into that because as we learned and as she shared, a lot of what we believe when we become spiritual, when we begin to have our awakening or our enlightening journey, is that, eventually you get to this idea that you are God, that there is no God out there, that all of the light, everything that exists is in here first. God is a construct, it's an outward projection of our own divinity, and that is true. So I really want to specifically answer this question for her because it can sound antithetical to what I've described in another video, but here we go. So first and foremost, it's imperative that we understand, in order to understand where we are, we have to comprehend how we got here and what came before. And I'm not here to wreck anybody's dogma. I'm not here to break down your belief system. You don't have to think what I think. However, creationists, spiritualists, scientists, we all have this idea of how old the earth is, how it came into being, and that looks very different on the surface for sure. Creationists believe the earth is anywhere from 6,000 to 7,000 years old. It was created over the span of 7 days, and here we are living out this reality as quote unquote children of God. That's the creationist view of how we arrived here. The spiritual / scientific, it's, science and spirituality ultimately are the same thing discussed in two different languages, but science / spirituality tells us that the earth is almost 14 billion years old. It's part of a grander cosmos that is continually in an expansion. It began at a singular point 13.8 billion years ago, and that we have all simply evolved over time to be here now where we are, until a second goes by, because nothing is still. It's all constantly moving and expanding. But nonetheless, that is a very different view than the 7 year / 7 day. Our creation versus science, or creation versus spirituality, are completely at opposite ends of the spectrum. This we know. However, the commonality, the thing that we all agree on, is before anything was here, there was nothing, right? Scientists have stated all along, and they're beginning to postulate that perhaps there was something before the Big Bang, and I've even heard it postulated that there were multiple Big Bangs over and over, which makes sense because we live here in a series of patterns. We live here in a series of repeating patterns, so it wouldn't shock me. Now, does it matter at the end of the day how many times we've come and gone and restarted and gone back to nothing? It doesn't really matter how many times, except for the fact that we are coming to a natural ending. We are coming to duality once again, or for the very first time, depending on how you see it, imploding, consolidating, contracting back in on itself. However, both sides of the argument about how old the world is and how we got here know and agree that there was nothing prior to the last version of creation. So if we start there, if we start back at the nothingness, if we go back to the empty void that is spoken about biblically, that is also talked about, or has been talked about thus far, up until very recently, even in science, talks about there was a void, there was nothing, and there was this pinpoint of energy that expanded, blew up, and has been becoming what we live in for almost 14 billion years. So if you understand that there was nothingness first, you have to concede, irrespective of how it happened, then there was something. There was nothing, and then there was something. Now, religion calls that something God. Science and spirituality call that energy. Regardless of what you call it, it's the same. I choose to believe that there's an energy because I do not believe in a mythical, bearded, masculine deity that has all of us at the end of a puppet string. We have free will, but we don't really, because if we don't pick the way of the thing in the sky, then we all burn in sulfur forever. That's not free will. That's a threat. So, you know, I grew up in an independent, born-again Christian household, and I was indoctrinated with all of that dogma about salvation, and the consequences of sin is death, and they don't just mean dying, like we all die, right? Even born-again Christians die. But it's a final death. It's an eternal death. It's a flame-ridden, sulfur-burning, tortured death. So, yeah, if you want to believe that, that's fine. But regardless of how you look at it, there was nothing, then there was something. Doesn't matter what you call the something. I choose to believe, and I understand through physics and science, that that something was energy. But the moment something came into being, the moment there was not nothingness anymore, because there was something, it was a duality. It was two. There is no form in the universe without duality. You cannot have high without low. You cannot have black without white. You cannot have male without female. You cannot have these things once the something arrived. So call it what you like. Use whichever word you choose. But understand behind the words, there's a reality that the words cannot convey. So to answer Ashley's question, we were nothing. There was nothing. Now, I don't believe that there's ever been nothing, because there's not nothing in the universe. There's never nothing. Even everything that we believed was nothingness in space, we have learned is something. It's called dark matter. It's called dark energy. Very much a part of the universal construct of time and space and form. So, when you understand that the moment what you were in the nothingness became something, which we call energy, it was in conflict. There was a duality. There was a polar equity that had to be addressed, had to be acknowledged, and had to be navigated. So when I say that darkness is the default setting here in the earth realm, I am not necessarily talking about we are the darkness. We are dark and we are light, because the thing from which we come is dark and light. As soon as a thing became the thing, there was a duality. We were at sheer nothingness. And again, I don't believe there's ever been nothingness, but before there was something, there was nothing. That nothingness was perfection. That nothingness was emptiness. That nothing was a void. And I could get into it in another video, and if anybody really wants to know, hit me up in the comments. I have been to that void. I have experienced that void. I have, in my spirit molecule journeys, gone all the way back to before there was anything, to the nothingness. And I can do a whole video on why nothing became something. But that is not for today. There was nothing. And nothing was empty, black perfection. Because in the absence of duality, there's neutrality. That's the singularity. But the moment something showed up, dark and light showed up. So the something that we're familiar with is planet Earth, because we don't live, as humans, we live on this round ball flying through space at a velocity you can't even comprehend, but you understand nothing in the universe is still. Everything is in flux, everything is chaotic, everything is in motion. So we were on the other side of the something. You might say there was pure light or pure neutrality. But as soon as we showed up in form, as soon as form became the thing, dark and light were created. And I will tell you this, we were at neutrality. We lived in perfection. We created this construct of a quote-unquote physical world because we wanted to better understand our singularity, because we wanted to better understand our neutrality. You don't understand an ice bath if you've never walked through a fire. You cannot comprehend the disparity until you've been to both ends of the spectrum. We are here in a dualistic, dark energy. The earth realm, I call it the chaos carnival. It's dark because we come from neutrality. We come from nothingness into something. But that something is to teach us about our singularity, about our neutrality, about our perfection. So we walk in this land as light and dark, for sure. But the propensity here is to experience the darkness because we came from nothingness. We want to better understand our sourceness, our true, infinite, divine, neutral nature. We don't understand that until we've been to the opposite of that. So you have to first perceive yourself as not the human body walking around this planet. My dear sister, look at me. I am not this. This is an avatar. This holds the energy of my infinite divine self, but because of the nature of form, it's flawed, it's frail, it's broken, it's here to learn, it's here to recognize, it's here to remember and reconnect. Sorry, I'm on the rooftop terrace at my place, and it's so gorgeous out, but it's a little windy up here. Yeah. This is Steffi. She's awesome. I've said this in other videos. I love her, but she's as jacked up as the rest of the world given a particular set of circumstances on any given day. Now, because I do this work and I've done this work, and this is a 30-year process of awakening and enlightenment and transcendence and ascension, I certainly don't walk around the planet like I used to. I'm definitely not the dualistic entity that arrived here almost 60 years ago. But as long as I'm in form, I will always be a dualistic entity. I understand that. My job, now that I know what I am, is to regulate my who, so as not to be pulled off to the right or to the left, to the dark or to the light. I practice walking a balanced center because in that balanced center, I am having the experience of my singular, infinite, divine nature. And I don't use the word divine religiously. I want to be careful about that too. See, words and language is what we have, for sure, but it's a cluster. It's a cluster. I get word salad as a comment all the time in my videos, and I love it because, you know, even the Bible says there are those with eyes to see and ears to hear. This is for people with ears to hear. If you don't get it, gosh, I love you. Thanks for boosting the algorithm. That's what I write back. Thank you for boosting the algorithm. But yeah, you can be a singular being to a large degree while you're here. It takes remembering, putting back together the two sides, the polar equities of you and what you are. And when you do that internally, when you do that inside, you then get to go out into the larger quote unquote reality and be that amongst the quote unquote others who ultimately are just a version of you. They're another aspect of source here having their experience. My job here is to be Steffi Starr as source energy, so source better understands itself and Steffi Starr better understands source energy. But everything is source. Everyone is source. We're here to have the experience of our infinite, divine, neutral, singular self by becoming the opposite of that. That's how it works. That's why this is a dark area. This is a dark area. The universe is dark because duality is great till it ain't. Duality's fabulous. We love beauty, but we don't want the horror. Well, you don't get one without the other. And the sooner you can wrap your arms around both and understand the purpose of each, you're going to struggle. That's the nature of duality. It's struggle. It's a challenge. We have to remember, we have to reconnect, we have to put ourselves back to our whatness, to our fullness, to our wholeness, to our right, not right, to our divinity. So, maybe you're more confused, maybe you have more questions, I don't know, but I did my best to answer your question to the degree that I could. We are light, but we are here in form, and form is duality, and duality ultimately is an aspect of darkness. And again, darkness, we have to get rid of this idea. Judgment is the opposite of peace. It's the polar equity to peace. The moment you're in judgment about something, you've given up your peace about it. So I don't even use the word darkness. It's not a negative. It's a necessary part of being here. When you can hold the polar equities in balance, that is a huge movement for an individual toward returning to their singular divine nature. So darkness is not negative. Darkness is necessary. It is part of duality that we need. So yes, it's dark down here, but that's the only way we're ever going to understand the fullness of our light being, of our lightness. Because we are on our way back to singularity again. It's just a pattern, repeating over and over. We've done it ad infinitum. And we're about to do it again. It's all about to collapse in on itself. And by the end of 2026, we're going to be living on a very different planet in a very different reality. So buckle up, babies. It's time to shift. It's time to transcend. It's time to put ourselves back together. It's time to close the chasm between our duality and reconnect and remember ourselves to our oneness. And I'm here for it all day long. I answer questions. I love talking about this stuff. I'm also very, very grateful to have this platform, this technology that allows me to share this awareness with all of you. For all your comments, for all of your feedback, I'm so grateful, and yeah, always an honor. So, as always, you are so seen and so loved. Aho.